Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a close look at, well, a stack of material, all centered around one organ that often flies under the radar, the liver.
It's a really fascinating area, especially, through the lens of this particular source we're looking at.
Right, our source for this deep dive is excerpts from the book Medical Medium Liver Rescue.
And our mission really is to unpack some of the surprising claims and insights in this material, things about the liver's true role in our health, maybe why it's behind chronic illnesses.
And even how it connects to how we feel emotionally.
Exactly.
So get ready, because this deep dive might challenge some things you thought you knew. Hopefully you'll see this vital organ in, well, a whole new light. Okay, let's get into this. When we think about important organs, the liver, it doesn't usually make the headlines, does it?
No, not really. You hear tons about the brain, the heart, skin, lungs, the gut. They get all the attention.
Yeah, and this material actually calls the liver Mr. Popular, but sort of ironically,
Yeah.
popular for how unpopular it is, for its
Yeah.
lack of fame despite doing so much.
It's true. It's not like the brain controlling thoughts or the heart visibly beating. The liver just works quietly. We don't really feel it doing its thing most of the time.
And yet the core idea here, from this source, is that the liver is, and this is a quote, a real missing link in understanding our health.
That's a huge claim. The book basically argues that if you discover the liver's power, learn how to care for it, it can change everything for people dealing with health issues.
It suggests that loads of common symptoms, conditions, diseases, things medical science doesn't usually connect to the liver, actually start there.
Yeah, and here's where it gets, well, pretty profound. This material makes this astonishing claim. It says the liver's inner workings are among the most profound hidden miracles of the universe.
Wow, okay, hidden miracles.
Yeah, it puts it right up there with like the mystery of birth or these huge sea creatures from the past. It's suggesting there's this incredible, almost magical world inside the liver that science hasn't fully grasped yet.
And when you look at what the source claims the liver does, that idea of it being miraculous, well, it starts to make a bit more sense, maybe. It lists over 2,000 functions.
2,000, yeah. Just think about that number for a single organ.
Just a few from the list here. It processes fat, and the source specifically says it protects the pancreas while doing that. It stores glucose, glycogen, vitamins, minerals.
Right, and it's constantly like disarming and detaining harmful stuff. It screens and filters your blood. It even has its own personalized immune system guarding it.
The description of its workload is just intense. The source says it's working off the charts hard.
Uh-huh. Like someone juggling, what was it, 5 jobs and 100 responsibilities, but even harder than that.
It uses this analogy, like finally getting acknowledged for all the endless, thankless chores you do around the house.
Right, suggesting the liver deserves that kind of recognition for keeping everything running silently behind the scenes. It's essential work.
What's also really interesting, and maybe a bit unexpected from this source, is this deep connection it draws between liver health and our emotional state.
Our well-being.
Yeah, it says they're intimately tied.
Yeah.
The book actually suggests that getting in touch with your liver, like understanding what it needs, is a way to get in touch with who you are on a soul level.
Wow. Soul level.
That's the idea. Liver harmony, according to this view, is key for experiencing more wonder and magic and happiness. It even calls the liver your best friend.
So it's not just physical, it's saying our emotions affect the liver, and the liver's health really impacts how we feel day to day.
Exactly. It's presented as a two-way street.
Okay, so it's doing all this vital work.
Yeah.
What happens when it gets overloaded? This deep dive points to several key things it calls troublemakers that burden the liver.
Yeah, and a really big one discusses dietary fats. The source talks about Code Red Plus diets.
Code Red Plus.
Basically, diets that are 30% or more fat, especially the kinds of fats the source deems unhealthy.
And how does the liver handle that, according to this? It apparently goes into all-out adaptogenic mode. It has to dig into its reserves, produce way more bile, like 50% more, sometimes basically taking bullets for you, working overtime to break down that fat so it doesn't damage your heart or pancreas.
Taking bullets, that's a strong image.
It is. And the analogy used is really vivid, too. Imagine waking up, getting dressed, and someone just dumps a bucket of oil all over you.
Oh, man.
You'd spend your whole day just trying to clean up that mess.
Right.
That's supposedly what the liver faces again and again, constantly cleaning up excess fat.
Okay, fat is one big troublemaker. What else? Pathogens are mentioned too.
Yes, specifically viruses and bacteria. Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, is singled out as a major player.
Really? EBV?
Yeah, the source makes a pretty surprising claim that EBV is the root cause behind hepatitis A through E, and links it to a whole host of chronic illnesses, too. It says EBV can actually scar liver tissue and releases waste, like neurotoxins.
And other viruses.
Other herpetic viruses, like HHV6, HHV7, they get linked to things like spleen inflammation in this material.
Okay. And bacteria.
Strep bacteria is mentioned. The source claims it thrives in a congested liver and, interestingly, that it can feed on antibiotics. It links strep to digestive problems, even SIBO.
Wow, okay. So fats, pathogens, then there's the whole issue of toxins accumulating.
Right. And the list here is long. Toxic heavy metals, mercury, cadmium, barium, nickel, arsenic.
Where do those come from, according to the source?
Things like old dental fillings, air pollution, pesticides, even contaminated water.
And radiation is mentioned, like from
Yeah.
flying a lot or medical scans.
Exactly. Pesticides and herbicides, too, including old ones like DDT that are still lingering in the environment.
And the more obvious ones.
Yeah, alcohol, antibiotics, many pharmaceuticals. It specifically calls out prescription amphetamines, opioids, statins.
And it points out an irony with statins, right, often given for cholesterol, which this source links back to the liver anyway.
And claims the statins themselves can actually make the liver's situation worse. It's quite the claim.
What else on the toxin list?
Plastics, formaldehyde, which it says can be in cosmetics, carpets, food preservatives, industrial chemicals from cleaners, nail products, stuff like that. The book basically says the liver tries to store these toxins safely away to protect the rest of you.
Okay, another Buddha mentioned is stress. Just everyday stress.
Yeah, stress, big emotional challenges, even just skipping meals, these trigger excess adrenaline. And the source claims the liver has to absorb and neutralize this adrenaline. It's described as a big job, sometimes overwhelming for the liver.
And then there's one that's maybe less obvious. Chronic dehydration.
Right, and not just feeling thirsty now and then, but like a long-term, low-level lack of proper hydration.
How does that impact the liver specifically?
Well, the source describes something pretty amazing. It calls it the liver's camel effect.
Camel effect.
Yeah, it claims the liver has this unknown chemical function where it can grab molecules of living water from certain fruits and vegetables you eat and store it for long-term hydration.
Seriously.
That's
That's unusual.
It is. But the material says this ability fades over time, especially with all the other burdens piled on. And that leads to something called dirty blood syndrome.
Dirty blood syndrome. What's that?
It's described as blood becoming thick, toxic, and low on oxygen. This apparently makes the heart work much harder to pump it around, causing energy problems.
And it even links this to dark under-eye circles.
Directly. It says those dark circles are a sign of a toxic, dehydrated liver and this dirty blood.
Okay, so we have fats, pathogens, toxins, stress, dehydration, all burdening the liver. This leads to the idea that a lot of symptoms aren't random, right?
Exactly. The source presents it as a sluggish or damaged liver asking for assistance. Symptoms are like a foreign language we need to learn to translate.
Let's get into some of those specific mystery symptoms the source connects to the liver. Fatigue is a big one.
Yeah, often just blamed on stress or being busy, right?
Yeah.
But this source suggests it's very often actually EBV, the virus being active in the liver.
What about hot flashes? Usually linked to hormones, menopause.
This material claims they can be linked to the liver storing old viruses, heavy metals, or other toxins over many years.
Weight gain and mystery hunger, too.
Claimed to be related to the liver an overwhelming amount of the time. The weight gain part is tied to these thyroid liver and adrenal liver links the source talks about.
So the thyroid or adrenals might be involved, but it traces back.
Traces back to the liver, yeah. And that mystery hunger, where you feel hungry even after eating, tied either to a pre-fatty or fatty liver that can't store glucose well, or excess adrenaline messing with glucose reserves, especially if you skip meals.
Okay, skin conditions. This is interesting. Eczema, psoriasis, dry skin, hives.
Rosacea, even lupus-style rashes. The source presents these as signs of a congested liver, basically leaking poisons out through the skin because there's nowhere else for them to go.
And these are often blamed on other things, right? Allergies, autoimmune, genes.
Or even just the seasons, like seasonal affective disorder sometimes gets blamed for skin changes. This source says, look to the liver. Acne specifically gets tied back to strep bacteria in the liver, feeding on past antibiotic use.
Wow. Okay, what about blood sugar issues? Diabetes, type 1, 1.5, type 2.
This source really challenges the conventional view here. It flat out claims they are not genetic, nor are they autoimmune conditions where the body attacks itself.
So what is the cause, according to this book?
Prediabetes and type 2 are linked to a liver that's just beaten down. It doesn't have the glucose reserves it needs, so it can't help the pancreas regulate blood sugar or stop insulin resistance. And high-fat diets apparently make this much worse.
And it stresses the liver's role in releasing stored glucose to keep blood sugar stable.
Absolutely, especially when fasting. That's presented as a critical, often overlooked liver function.
Then there's mystery high blood pressure.
Yeah, the source says when doctors can't find a clear heart, vascular, or kidney reason, it often has more to do with the liver than the cardiovascular system. The root cause, from this perspective, just isn't known by medical science yet in those cases.
In mystery heart palpitations. If the heart structure checks out fine.
This material suggests it can be caused by a specific kind of jelly-like buildup.
Okay, a buildup from the liver. How does that work?
The claim is this buildup originates in the liver. When the liver gets too overloaded, it can't contain it, so it leaves and travels in the bloodstream.
Okay.
Now, there's apparently a degreasing compound in the blood that should handle it, but this compound needs oxygen. And if you have that dirty blood, thick, toxic, low-oxygen blood from high-fat diets and dehydration, the compound doesn't work well.
So the buildup doesn't get broken down.
Right. It ends up sticking to things like heart valves, causing them to maybe stick slightly or spasm, and that's what you feel as a palpitation.
That's a very specific mechanism described there.
It is.
What about digestion? Low stomach acid, SIBO, bloating, constipation, IBS, even baby reflux.
All linked back to the liver in this source, too. It claims a weak, sluggish liver that isn't making enough bile signals the stomach to try and compensate. Initially, it might overproduce stomach acid, HCl, to help digest fat.
But then,
If the liver and the HCl production both weaken further, you get undigested fats and proteins reaching the small intestine. The fat goes rancid, feeds pathogens, and SIBO, for example, is described as a result of an unsupported liver that can't manage these bugs.
and the bloating, constipation, IBS.
That's connected in the source to lymphatic fluid building up around the gut. This buildup is supposedly caused by the toxins and pathogens the liver isn't handling well. It slows down peristalsis, the gut muscle movement leading to those symptoms,
And baby reflux.
called a mystery symptom of baby liver. Basically, an infant's liver is still developing, and they might have weaker HCl and bile, leading to poor fat and protein digestion.
Okay, lastly, neurological symptoms. Fatigue we mentioned, but also anxiety, depression, headaches, tingles, numbness, nerve pain. These seem purely neurological.
And the source agrees they are neurological symptoms, but it often points the finger back at the liver for the cause.
How so?
Either it's liver toxicity poisons the liver couldn't filter are getting into the bloodstream and affecting the brain, or it's those EBV neurotoxins we talked about earlier, directly irritating nerves.
Chemical sensitivities too.
Linked to an overloaded nervous system because the liver can't handle the incoming toxins. And food sensitivities from this perspective might be because viruses are making you more sensitive overall, or because certain foods are feeding those underlying pathogens.
This viewpoint also tackles two specific conditions, PANDAS and MTHFR. How does it explain PANDAS?
It argues it's not autoimmune and not just about strep. The claim is it's the HHV6 virus feeding on mercury in the body, and that process creates neurotoxins disrupting the brain.
And MTHFR gene mutations. That's a common diagnosis.
The source argues it's actually a misdiagnosis. It says it's often based on inflammation markers that mimic a genetic issue. The real problem, it claims, is a methylation issue, a key body process caused by liver sludge, meaning toxins, plus a virus.
And it mentions the liver having its own methylation process.
Yeah, an undiscovered one, according to the book, where it creates supervitamins bonded to natural sugar.
Okay. That is a lot of potential connections and symptoms linked back to the liver by this source.
So given all these burdens and problems, what does the material suggest we actually do? How do we support the liver?
Well, the focus really shifts hard towards fueling the liver properly. The source is adamant that the liver needs specific things: oxygen, water, mineral salts, and crucially sugar, specifically glucose.
Glucose from
Fruits and vegetables. That's highlighted as the liver's absolute preferred fuel. It needs this sugar, the source claims, to store nutrients effectively, to power its immune system, and basically to keep its engine cool and running smoothly.
And it pushes back against low-carb trends strongly. It claims that starving the liver of these natural sugars can actually cause the liver and the whole body to age faster.
Okay, so fuel it right. Does it list specific beneficial foods?
Oh yeah. Specific liver healing foods. Celery gets huge praise. It supposedly has cluster salts.
Cluster salts.
Yeah, unique sodium compounds that are claimed to inhibit pathogens, restore bile, expel toxins, dissolve gallstones, and boost stomach acid. Celery is called the ultimate gallbladder rehabilitator.
Wow. What else?
Apples and unsweetened applesauce, called a healing miracle food for liver and gallbladder. Their antioxidants, apparently altered by the liver, stop cell death, so anti-aging and indirectly stop viruses.
Interesting.
Wild blueberries and red pitaya or dragon fruit are noted for high anthocyanins, claimed to be much more liver healing and blood building than beets.
What about beets? They're often mentioned for liver health.
The source says they help a little, but raises concerns about GMOs and basically says other foods pack a bigger punch for the liver.
Okay. Any others?
Figs are mentioned for binding to pathogens and toxins in the gut, giving the liver a break. Garlic and onions are pathogen fighters, helping the liver's immune system.
Carrots.
Quick glucose source plus antiseptic compounds when raw.
And carbs like potatoes.
Sweet potatoes, winter squash, called critical clean carbohydrates for glucose. Potatoes are specifically noted for L-lysine, claimed to stop EBV.
And sugars like honey.
Raw honey and coconut water are listed as good sources of the natural sugars the liver needs.
So lots of specific foods to focus on. What about the flip side? What does it say to avoid the liver troublemakers?
It really hammers home avoiding high fat, especially fried or rancid fats, and it specifically calls out eggs, dairy, gluten, corn, soy, canola oil, processed foods generally, pork, farmed fish.
Artificial and natural flavors, dyes, sweeteners.
Exactly. And it circles back to avoiding chemical exposures, petrochemicals, unnecessary pharmaceuticals, radiation, heavy metals, pesticides, formaldehyde, preservatives. Less exposure means less burden for the liver to store.
Now, this source also has some strong opinions on certain health trends, doesn't it? Like vinegar, ACV.
Yeah, it calls vinegar an insult to the liver, definitely not a cleanse. It argues gallstones come from high-fat diets and are best dissolved by foods like celery, greens, and apples, not vinegar.
And coffee enemas, sometimes used for detox.
The source claims they might force a temporary purge but cause a boomerang effect. Toxins get stirred up and just go back to the liver. Plus, they trigger adrenaline, which the liver then has to absorb. The claim is the liver could end up more toxic.
What about supplements?
Mentioned as potentially helpful, but the source says their full liver benefits aren't really understood by science yet, and choosing the right kinds is key.
So the overall approach seems to be about working with the liver.
Totally. There's a line, "You'll never be smarter than your liver." It warns against pushing too hard with harsh cleanses. That can apparently make the liver perform less well or even shut down. A sluggish liver is described as the liver's way of going on strike.
And healing takes time.
Definitely. It depends on how much toxic stuff, how many troublemakers are stored deep inside. It's not an overnight fix, according to this perspective.
And the book outlines specific ways to do this, right? Like the liver rescue morning.
Yeah, briefly mention. It involves specific hydration, mineral salts, high glucose foods in the morning, and crucially, avoiding fat during that time to keep the liver's detox window open. And there's a more structured plan called the Liver Rescue 3.6.9 protocol, all designed for gradual support.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Beyond the physical food and avoidance strategies, this source gets into some less conventional areas, connecting the liver to our emotional and, well, spiritual side.
It really does. It talks about meditating for your liver.
Meditating for your liver.
Yeah, not necessarily a complex meditation, but more about consciously giving your liver attention, care, respect. The idea is this helps the liver stabilize, strengthen, and find the kind of inner peace it needs to heal properly.
And it talks about peace itself, focusing on self-compassion.
Exactly. It contrasts self-compassion with self-love, suggesting self-compassion is what's really needed when you're suffering during the healing process, and that it connects us more to the wider world.
So how does it suggest finding this peace, not just through trying harder or going on retreats?
No, it suggests true peace comes partly from accepting that we don't control life's storms, and accepting the fundamental truth that everything changes, nothing ever stays the same.
Finding peace in the certainty that things will change.
Right. Even when things feel really bad, knowing the storm will eventually pass, that things will shift. And according to the source, your liver's health is deeply connected to your ability to tap into that kind of inner peace and self-compassion.
So wrapping this all up, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive into this particular source material?
Well, according to this perspective, the liver is just this incredible powerhouse, doing massive amounts of work, mostly unseen, but it's getting hammered by modern life diet, toxins, pathogens, stress.
And that struggle, that overload, is presented as the root cause of a huge, vast range of mystery symptoms and chronic conditions that conventional science often attributes elsewhere or doesn't fully understand.
Yeah, the core message from this book is really about supporting the liver through very specific, conscious dietary choices, emphasizing natural sugars from fruits and veggies, specific healing foods, while being really strict about avoiding those troublemakers, especially unhealthy fats.
And listening to the liver's needs is key for health and healing. It's definitely a view that challenges some mainstream health ideas, particularly around fats and sugars.
It provides a very detailed alternative framework for understanding illness and healing, placing the liver right at the center, focusing on these underlying issues like viruses and toxins that it claims the liver is constantly battling.
It really makes you think about the liver differently, doesn't it? Not just as a filter, but as this central player in almost everything.
So considering how hard your liver works for you, mostly silently, and this source's view connecting it to both physical and emotional well-being, even peace, what's maybe one small step you could take today just to acknowledge and support this vital organ, this best friend, as the source calls it, giving it a bit of the care it might be craving?